Congressman Steve King. Congressman, good to see you. Welcome to Hannity. Glad you could be with us.
Good to be back with you again, Sean. Thank you.
All right, so the average Americans watching this, they pay their taxes, and I think if they got a call from the IRS saying, by the way, we've caught 2 years you didn't pay, you would not only pay those 2 years, but probably the other 2 years, wouldn't you?
Well, I think it had to be obvious to Tim Geithner that when the IRS audited him and said, you owe us to pay for the tax liability that you clearly had and acknowledged for 2003 and 2004, he had to know that he'd also received the reimbursement payment from the IMF for the funds that he did not pay for 2001 and 2002. Some would also call that double dipping as well as tax avoidance, Sean.
Well, it is pretty fascinating that he ultimately did pay just before he was given the nod by Barack Obama and the nomination for Treasury Secretary. So what should we glean from that?
Well, I think we can glean from it that the pattern that's there is that he willfully avoided taxes. I think there's enough evidence there that that would be the case. And even if that were not the case, and by the way, I don't accept common mistake, and I don't accept either bad legal advice or ignorance is an excuse, because those would be the reasons that any tax avoider would use when the IRS came to audit them. So I think we have to draw the same conclusions that we would if he were anybody else that were paying taxes.
I'll tell you, Democrats, you got to give them credit. They're great when they come up with a mantra whenever they're in trouble. If it's Al Gore, no controlling legal authority, Sandy Berger stuffing, National Archive documents in his pants, and everyone, oh, he was just sloppy. And it seems that the bumper sticker now is, this was an honest mistake. I don't know many Americans that are making those honest mistakes and given a pass by politicians. Do you?
Well, and Sean, there's a situation where Americans have to play by the rules. We have to establish the rule of law. It has to apply to everyone. And when you see that the apologists for Tim Geithner, who think he's so brilliant that we have to have him leading the Treasury Department, are simply now changing the evaluations of the rules, that means, I guess, that you write the rules to produce a particular effect, but if it doesn't produce the effect you're after, then you change the rules after the fact. That'll make a whole generation cynical, and it's going to be hard to collect any taxes if he's heading up the U.S. Treasury.
Congressman, I talk to a lot of people on my radio program, people that email us on our new blog here on the Fox News channel. I got to tell you what they're telling me. They're angry with many of the Republicans in the Senate. They're angry that they're not a little tougher on Hillary. They're angry about that Eric Holder hasn't had tougher questions. They're angry that Carol Browner was associated with a radical group. And they're specifically angry about this case because everybody's paying their taxes. Do they have a case to be made that the Republicans in the Senate are not being tough enough on these nominees?
Oh, I think they do, Sean. And there's only so much political capital that can be burned on these confirmations, and there's a tremendous amount of goodwill out there towards the incoming Obama administration. That's being felt by the senators on the Hill. But I can tell you that Democrats would put up a much more tenacious fight on these confirmations than will Republicans. We're too nice, and we're not aggressive enough. And I won't either let Geithner off the hook on the hiring of the domestic who was illegally employed under him. The history of Zoe Baird and Kimball Wood and Linda Chavez, all disqualified from the cabinet.
Last question.
For the same kind of offenses.
For the exact same, and they all withdrew, but I'm running out of time. Last question. You thought that it was bizarre. You were quoted in the Political as saying that Barack Obama has, in fact, decided to use his middle name when being sworn in. Why did you use the term bizarre?
Well, I think it's bizarre that he could take that double standard and use his people and some of his own comments and ask John McCain to, let me say, censure me for simply talking about his middle name. That was an 8-day global news cycle, Sean. And now to turn around and say, now I'm going to use my middle name because it sends a political message to the Muslims in the world. That's a bizarre double standard. It's an immediate flip, and we're seeing many flips along the way. So I just think that we ought to be able to speak the truth and talk about it objectively, and there should not be some kind of politically correct web that puts over the top of those of us who are trying to speak about objective truth.
Congressman, when some of my talk radio friends used it, they were excoriated. We appreciate you being with us. Congressman King, thank you for being on board, and we appreciate it.
I thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
And coming up right after the